I'm named Xavier and I've had depression for the past 6 years in differing forms and lengths. During this time I've realised some things about how we deal with certain things and how we view certain situations and people. We seem to forget that the people around us have their own lives and could be struggling in their own ways. It seems down to a natural ignorance we can sometimes be guilty of judging. We meet people every day, whether it's encountering a large group of people or just one person at the bus stop. We can't help but make judgments. We judge people's habits without first considering why those habits exist in the first place, and we still to some extent judge people on their class, their background, their friends and family, and their character. Yet so many people have different stories and problems, and a common problem at the moment is depression. I'm interested in finding out how aware we are of people's state and of depression as a whole. I went home to interview a friend of mine and get his view on seeing me depressed and his opinion on it as a condition and how we can treat it. From a teenage perspective, Alexander, what is depression?
Well, I suppose it's kind of like a hatred for the world, I suppose. Looking at it and comparing the world to yourself, I suppose. Like, looking at things that are happening every day and sort of wishing that you were doing it. So, if people are playing football and you're watching them and you think, I'm too fat to be playing football, that would make you depressed. And you sort of want to lose weight, and you might go too far the other way by being too depressed and just sort of go anorexic, which isn't great.
No, obviously anorexia is a medical condition. Do you class depression as a condition?
Yeah, because people have it and it's not by choice. They don't choose to be depressed, otherwise the world would be happy, and that doesn't happen every day.
What do you say to the opinions of depression being kind of self-attentive and just people wanting more attention? In complete honesty.
Bullshit.
Right.
It's totally not that. I mean, my mum sort of has to take tablets for it. Sort of does. She does. But she's not totally depressed because she looks happy and stuff. And she's not doing it for attention. It's because there's stuff going on that makes her sad and she overthinks it maybe. And yeah.
Is there any way we can kind of change that view, thinking?
Probably not. People who are going to look at it like that are going to look at it like that. It's like politics. People who are on one side are very unlikely to change their ideas and everything like
that. As a friend that's kind of known me during the time I was depressed and I wasn't, was there any kind of signs or?
Well, yeah, you just sort of used to run away and hide, and that's good for a certain way, but if you hide for too long, then you're going to start taking it out on yourself, and then you're going to suffer in silence, and then nobody's going to be able to help you, and it's all going to go downhill.
It was interesting to interview my friend because I've known him for 12 years, and with depression and things like this, sometimes it's obvious to see, but there's no way to completely go about talking about it and going through it. And he mentioned about comparisons and like kind of weight issues. And I think that's always quite a huge thing, is self-doubt and self-comparison to other things. With depression, people seem to find solace in loving other people's images and not loving their own. And like that was one main thing with me, is when I was younger, and still kind of do, it's difficult to find good things about yourself, because that's just part of it. It's like a negative kind of aura with it. And that goes with the whole idea of hiding. You're not supposed to hide too much from it, because you will be self-destructive if you start to hide. I always kind of hid away from the main crowd, and if I was with my friends and I wasn't feeling very good, then I'd try and stay away from them. For something in your head says you want to be alone, but at the same time you know you shouldn't be alone. And that's a very important thing about it. I think you need to be around people, and you need to understand that comparing people against yourself is not going to work, because obviously you're an individual, and hiding just doesn't work. Understanding how common mental health problems can be, and seeing some of the facts, I wanted to speak to someone whose job it was to treat these conditions. So I went to Colchester Institute to speak to Anne O'Donnell, a counsellor there. How do we distinguish depression from just sadness?
I mean, around sadness, you don't normally get the same symptoms as you would with depression. Depression generally is a longer term of low mood, and it brings helplessness and hopelessness and changes in the way that we behave. We might find that we're not eating properly, we're not sleeping properly, we have loss of concentration, we have loss of motivation. The metaphors that are used, the famous one is the black dog, which Winston Churchill used, and the organisation SANE used as a campaign. Other people describe it as a black cloud consuming them. Other people have, one client described it to me as being in a dark, dank tunnel in a castle, in the basement of a castle with no escape, with no way out. And all of these images conjure up a very dark and frightening place to be. There's a lot of fear that surrounds it. They don't understand necessarily what's going on for them. And it's hard then for them to make other people understand how they feel, because sometimes they don't understand it themselves. And if you say to somebody, well, pull yourself together, who's got depression or mental health, it's just like saying to somebody with a broken leg, well, just walk.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
The students that I see, there's an expectation of perfection.
Yeah.
Which,
could you expand on that at all?
Well, they're expected to have the perfect look, the perfect partner, the perfect social life.
I think interviewing the counsellor was one of the probably the most interesting parts of this documentary, because personally I've had counselling in the past for a different matter, but it's always been one of those things that I've had problems with to do with my depression. And it seems quite common as well, as I've gone on, I've realised that people do have a problem with the idea of counselling and counselling as a whole. People are afraid and embarrassed of saying to people, I need counselling, I need help. I know that myself, because I've already gone through counselling, the idea of saying I'm depressed, I've, kind of at a point where my life might be quite almost at risk, and saying that I need someone else to come in and help me with that. It's one of those things that's quite embarrassing. You don't want to admit. You don't want to admit to yourself that someone else needs to help you with this. You want to be able to do it yourself, and that's the thing about depression. It's quite lonely. It's a lonely thing, and if you can get out of that, I think that's one thing that seems to be linking in every single thing I've gone through. And she mentioned about the idea of perfection and the image of perfection, especially within youth. And I think that's quite interesting as well, because the media obviously portrays the youth as being bad, but they also portray images of the beautiful teenager, the teenager with a wonderful partner and things like this, and good grades. And that's quite destructive. I think as a world we need to almost be more aware of what we're doing and how it can affect people. To get a more scientific and psychological perspective, I went to the Brain Science Department at the University of Essex to speak to Dr. Nicholas Cooper about how depression affects the brain. So, what's the helmet?
This is an EEG cap. EEG stands for electroencephalogram, and we can use these caps because embedded in them are various electrodes, and we can use those electrodes to measure the electrical activity of the brain underneath the cap. The reason why we're interested in the electrical activity of the brain is because it's been shown there are various problems arising in the brain associated with depression. So, for example, some people have discovered that there's an imbalance between the activation in the frontal lobes of the brain, between the left and the right hemispheres, particularly in parts of the brain called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which are about here and here. Now, one of the things that we can do to try and treat this imbalance, if you like, involves this tool over here. Now this tool is called a transcranial magnetic stimulation coil, and basically it works on very simple Faraday principles, that if you pass an electrical current through a coil, you can get a magnetic field at right angles to that current. Now that magnetic field we can pass from the coil through the skull into the brain, and we can use that to just transiently interrupt the working of the brain. Consequently then, this has been used to try and readdress the balance of excitation in the frontal parts of the brain that we find in depression.
The brain science aspect of it was probably the most unknown thing for me. I wanted to go there and see it for the mental condition that it is. I wanted to find out to what lengths will people go to get past such a debilitating condition. And the machine that changed parts of the frontal lobes to kind of reactivate them and make people happier was like, it was incredible that people could literally make themselves happier for even just like for a temporary moment, and they use that, and they're still trying to research it. But the interesting thing about that was the fact that that particular machine was only available in Australia and in some countries. And for some reason we don't have it over in the UK, and there's no similar cure like that in the UK. Curing depression it's almost quite a strange word to use, I suppose, because depression is escapable, and I think that's what's important, because if we allow ourselves to join in with other people and allow ourselves to let our friends help us and let counsellors help us and accept any medication or any treatment that would help it, then that's something that just has to be done. And the thing people seem to be confused about with depression is the fact that people don't want to die. Like if they're suicidal, they don't want to die, and this was something the counsellor brought up. They don't want to die, but they want to escape. They want to escape from the problems. Depression isn't necessarily curable in that sense, but it's escapable. Although throughout the documentary I've learned more about depression as a whole and more information in different ways, like perspectively, I wanted to know just how aware we are as a country and as a world, really. Like, because we see people every day and because we have such a large amount of people that surround us, are we actually aware of what's going on with everyone? And it seems that to some extent we are, but there's still a lot that we need to be careful of, and we seem to be aware sometimes, but unaware as to what to do with that knowledge.